Let's talk about a man named Kaito Asahina. Or rather, let's talk about a man who died as Kaito Asahina and then refused to stay dead. When we meet him, he's 40 years old and he's laying bricks. Not as a hobby, not as some humble passion project. He's laying bricks because that's all he has left to do. His hands, the same hands that once tore monsters apart with raw, conjured power, the same hands that once commanded an empire of survivors, are cracked and bleeding from manual labor. And the cruelest detail in this entire opening isn't the blood, it's that nobody is watching. Nobody came to check on him. In a world rebuilt from apocalypse, where every able body matters, this man, once a legend, has become so irrelevant that his death will go completely unnoticed. That's the thesis of this entire story, by the way. Not revenge is sweet, not power fixes everything. The thesis is this: betrayal doesn't just take what you have, it takes your visibility. It makes you disappear while you're still breathing. And that's so much worse than dying. So we get these flashes, these fragments of who he used to be. A younger Kaito, mid-20s, standing in ceremonial robes with violet energy crackling around his shoulders while people bow to him. A woman named Yuna Mizoguchi, smiling softly, her hand on his arm like she actually loves him. A man named Ren Takahashi, arms slung around his shoulder like a brother. And the narration doesn't even need to tell you these people betrayed him. The color grading tells you. These flashbacks are warm, golden, nostalgic. And we already know, instinctively, that warmth was a lie. Then he collapses, face in the dust, one hand reaching out for something that isn't there anymore. And in that moment, right as he's dying, a voice speaks. Cold, clinical, like a system administrator reviewing a support ticket instead of a god granting a dying wish. Host has expired. Reviewing conditions for second chance protocol. Successor clause, valid. Initiating regression. And just like that, 21 years vanish. Here's where the story gets interesting, because this isn't your standard wakes up as a kid and cries about it regression. Kaito wakes up screaming, not from sadness, but from sheer disorientation. His hands are smooth, unscarred. He's 19 years old again, in a cheap university dorm room, and it takes him almost a full minute to even process that this is real. And I want you to notice something about how he reacts once the shock wears off. He doesn't cry. He doesn't immediately run to find his wife or his best friend to warn them, to fix things, to relive some idealized past. His very first emotional beat, the first real expression that crosses his face, is something that isn't quite a smile. That's deliberate. This is a character who has already decided, before we even get his first line of dialogue, that this is a second chance at strategy, not a second chance at sentiment. The system confirms it. 412 days until the apocalypse. He knows exactly what's coming. He knows which meteors fall first, which cities collapse, which safe zones are actually death traps. And most importantly, he knows exactly where Yuna Mizoguchi and Ren Takahashi are right now, completely unaware that he even exists in their lives yet. This is the part where lesser stories would have him immediately go obsess over the people who wronged him. Instead, what does he do? He prepares. For 412 days, this man drops out of 2 classes, drains his savings, and methodically builds a survival kit. Knives, water purification tablets, a crossbow he teaches himself to use in an abandoned quarry. He memorizes evacuation routes that he knows will fail and the ones that won't. He becomes functionally invisible. The same quiet, easy-to-overlook student he always was, except now that invisibility is a weapon instead of a wound. And here's the analysis point worth sitting on. He watches Yuna from a distance exactly once, just once, and he feels nothing, no longing, no anger, just cold calculation. That single choice tells you everything about how this version of Kaito intends to operate. He's not interested in confrontation for its own sake. He's interested in leverage. Let her come to me when I have something worth taking, he thinks.
That's not a wounded man talking. That's a predator, setting a trap and being patient enough to wait for the prey to walk into it. When he finally does spot Ren, 61 days into his countdown, instead of the 90 days it took in his first life, that's actually a quietly brilliant detail, because it tells us the timeline isn't fixed. The world isn't following a script anymore. Kaito's actions are already creating ripples, even this early, even before he's done anything dramatic. Small deviations. That's foreshadowing for just how much bigger those ripples are going to get. Day 190. This is where Kaito recruits his first follower, and where the story properly introduces its central power system mechanic. He finds a man named Goro Hatano sleeping rough in an abandoned parking structure, clearly weeks into surviving alone with nothing. And what's interesting is how Kaito approaches him. No manipulation tactics here, no fake warmth. He just tells Goro the bald truth. I have food. In about 220 days, this entire city is going to die. I'm building something that survives that. I need people. Bizarre, blunt honesty, which, in a world about to be filled with liars, becomes its own form of seduction. Goro takes the food. And that night, Kaito activates an ability called Loyalty Sense for the first time since his regression, his eyes igniting violet, the system scanning Goro and returning a number, 71% loyalty, genuine, desperation-driven, trending upward. Now here's the analytical layer worth digging into. 71% isn't perfect devotion. It's not blind worship. The system actually tells Kaito why it's at that number. That Goro values being trusted more than being protected. That's such a smart piece of world building because it turns the power system from a simple good guy or bad guy detector into something closer to genuine emotional intelligence. Kaito isn't just identifying threats, he's learning how to actually lead people, which matters enormously for a character who, in his first life, led an entire empire and still somehow missed the 2 betrayals happening right under his nose. And then, almost immediately, the story delivers its thematic gut punch. 2 weeks later, Goro brings back a second survivor, Shun Ibaraki. Friendly smile, easy gratitude, seems harmless. Loyalty sense says otherwise. 9% loyalty. Active self-interest. He's already located a rival faction and is planning to sell out the group's location for his own protection. Estimated betrayal window, 6 to 9 days. This is the moment that defines the entire show's emotional engine. Kaito knew, instantly. Within 1 hour of meeting a stranger, he had more certainty about Shun's loyalty than he ever had about his own wife and best friend across 21 years of marriage and friendship. And instead of reacting with rage, he just smiles. Welcome Shun in. Lets the clock run. That's not mercy, that's patience as a weapon. 412 days end exactly on schedule, because of course they do. Kaito already knew the date down to the hour. The sky tears open with violet-white light. Meteors fall. The world that took him 21 years to lose the first time begins collapsing in real time. And this man watches it happen with the calm of someone checking off a to-do list. While panic spreads through the city, Kaito leads his first supply run with Goro and Shun straight into a depot that's about to be everyone else's first encounter with a monster. And when a creature attacks, early apocalypse monster, the Lurker, twisted limbs and glowing violet eyes, Shun screams in terror. Kaito doesn't even flinch. The narration tells us exactly why. He's killed 1,000 of these in his old life. This fight that terrifies everyone else in the room is to him basically muscle memory, and the system rewards him for it. His very first level up since the regression. Level 0 to level 1. Loyalty sense fully unlocked. This is such a clever structural choice because it ties his power growth directly to competence and survival, rather than some arbitrary training montage. He's not getting stronger because he trained really hard off-screen. He's getting stronger because he's doing the thing he already knows how to do, just better and earlier than anyone else on Earth currently can. And Shun notices. Goro notices too. But where Goro's reaction is growing respect, Shun's reaction is something colder, calculating. He's not impressed. He's recalculating his odds. Sure enough, days later, Shun slips away to use a hidden radio, feeding Hollowhaven's location to a rival scavenger faction. And when that faction shows up at night to raid the settlement, Kaito is already standing at the entrance, waiting, violet eyes glowing, completely unsurprised. "You walked into this because someone told you exactly where to find us, didn't you?" he says. Not a question, a verdict. What follows is one of this story's defining tonal choices, and it's worth pointing out explicitly because it tells you what kind of ruthless this character actually is. The confrontation with the rival faction is fast, brutal, efficient. But the consequence for Shun himself, the story doesn't show it directly. We get Kaito's silhouette standing over Shun's kneeling silhouette, violet light glowing faintly between them. And that's it. The narration even tells us outright he didn't raise his voice. He never did anymore. Rage was for people who still expected better. That's the character in one sentence. This isn't a man driven by anger anymore. Anger requires hope that things could have gone differently. Kaito doesn't have that hope. He has certainty. And certainty, delivered calmly, is so much scarier than rage ever could be. Goro watches the whole thing happen and says nothing, but he doesn't look away either. That's his arc beginning right there. A man slowly realizing exactly what kind of leader he's chosen to follow and choosing to stay anyway. 2 weeks later, Hollow Haven exists. That's the name Kaito gives his growing settlement, built inside the same parking structure, now reinforced with scavenged metal sheeting and a real barricade. And it's worth noting the quiet poetry in that name, Hollow, because that's exactly what he was the day he died the first time, hollowed out by betrayal. And now he's turning that same hollowness into a fortress, a foundation. The wound becomes the architecture. This is also where the story introduces its first real external threat, the Crimson Hand, a more established warlord faction that sends an envoy demanding tribute. "Submit, Hollow Haven, and you'll be protected," the envoy says. And Goro, predictably, wants to refuse immediately. But Kaito stops him, buys 3 days. Not out of fear, out of strategy. He's not just preparing a defense, he's deciding exactly how loud he wants this answer to be. And during those 3 days, the story brings in its first real harem track character, Mio Sakuragi, a scout for the Crimson Hand, sent to assess whether Hollow Haven is worth the trouble of destroying. We meet her hostile, bow drawn, arrow aimed at Kaito's chest in a dark alley, demanding a reason not to kill him on the spot. And Kaito's answer is the whole point of the scene, because you're not actually loyal to the people who sent you. You're just out of better options, same as everyone else in this world. Loyalty Sense backs it up. 0% loyalty to Crimson Hand, pure unaffiliated resentment, but high conversion potential if treated with respect instead of force. This is important because it sets up exactly how Kaito wins people over for the rest of the story. Not through romance tropes, not through grand gestures, through recognition. He sees what people actually are beneath their assigned role, and he says it out loud, plainly, without flattery. For someone like Mio, trained, weaponized, treated as a tool by a faction that doesn't actually value her, being truly seen is more disarming than any show of strength could be. When the Crimson Hand attacks at dawn, Hollow Haven holds the line. 12 untrained scavengers against trained soldiers, and they win. Because Kaito fights like a man who's done this 1,000 times. Because Goro fights with the loyalty of someone who's already chosen his side. And because the will to survive, when it's organized and led with absolute certainty, beats raw numbers. Mio watches the whole battle from a rooftop. And her internal conflict is honestly some of the most efficient character writing in this entire arc. Just one line of narration. They held. 12 untrained scavengers held the line against trained Crimson Hand soldiers. That's it. That's the entire seed of her defection. She walks down, offers her intelligence on Crimson Hand's operations in exchange for an actual place to belong. Not tribute, not servitude. And Loyalty Sense confirms it. 38% and rising. Genuine intent. Kaito accepts. The first harem track character is in. Earned through respect rather than rescue. And then, the moment this entire arc has been building toward. 1 month since the apocalypse began. A trading post has become the only neutral ground left in this shattered world. And that's exactly where Kaito runs into Ren Takahashi again. Except this time, Ren approaches him, impressed that a dozen untrained survivors held off Crimson Hand. Watch how differently this plays out compared to their first life dynamic. In Kaito's original life, Ren spent months cultivating their friendship, slowly, patiently, until trust was deep enough to exploit. This time, Ren is the one chasing the reputation. 3 months became 4 weeks. The student has become, in some quiet, ironic way, the variable Ren now has to react to instead of control. They shake hands. Ren introduces himself with the exact same effortless charisma Kaito remembers from 21 years ago, completely unaware, in this timeline, that he's shaking the hand of a man whose parents his own family secretly had murdered. And Kaito's internal monologue in this scene is brutal in its simplicity. Last time, it took you 3 months to find me. This time, you came running in 4 weeks. Let's see how differently this story ends. That's not hope talking. That's a man setting a new trap with the same patience as the old one, except now he's holding every card Ren doesn't know exists. And then, almost immediately after, Yuna, standing close beside Ren in the crowd. Dressed practically now, instead of in soft sweaters, but still managing to look effortlessly put together. Still watching the crowd with that same soft, calculating gaze that fooled an entire guild for over 2 decades. The show doesn't even need her to say anything threatening. Just one quiet, devastating piece of narration confirms everything we need to know. Yuna had learned long ago, watch the quiet ones. They're usually the ones actually worth watching. She's already circling back toward power. Some patterns, the story suggests, exist independent of timeline. Yuna will always end up standing next to whoever's rising fastest. It's not really about Ren or Kaito specifically. It never was. So Arc 1 ends with Kaito standing alone on a piece of rubble at sunset, looking out over a city he's rebuilding in fragments. Hollow Haven secured behind him. Crimson Hand's threat neutralized for now. Ren and Yuna already finding each other again, exactly like they did the first time around, just 21 years earlier than expected. And that closing narration line is really the mission statement for this entire series. He had 412 days to prepare for the apocalypse. He had no idea this time exactly how many it would take to build an empire from its ashes. But he had something he never had before, the knowledge of exactly who deserved to burn first. What makes this opening arc work isn't the power fantasy of it, even though that's obviously part of the appeal. It's that every single beat is built around the same idea. Trust, in this story, isn't sentiment, it's data. Kaito's entire arc is about a man who loved people blindly once, lost absolutely everything because of it, and has now built an ability that strips away every bit of guesswork from human loyalty. He doesn't have to wonder who'll betray him anymore. He just has to wait, watch the number, and decide what to do with the truth once he has it. Which raises the only real question worth asking heading into Arc 2. Now that he knows exactly who's loyal and who isn't, how long can a man stay this calm once the people who actually destroyed his first life are close enough to touch? We're about to find out.